The Washington Post, in the person of Tom Ricks, reporting that the Pentagon is now debating those three possibilities for Iraq. Going big. That means a large increase in U.S. forces in an attempt to bring down the level of violence. Going home. Well, that one is self-explanatory, the rapid withdrawal of American forces from Iraq. And going long, a compromise that would temporarily increase the U.S. force, now at 140,000, by 20 or 30,000 or so, to try to stop the violence in the short term, then gradually reducing the total force to 60,000. 60,000 who could remain in Iraq for 5 to 10 years. Let me now call in former Pentagon spokesman P.J. Crowley, now a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. P.J., good evening to you.
Hello, Keith.
Before we get to the viability of those options outlined in Tom Rick's article in the Post, let me ask you, it took a group of 16 military officers at the Pentagon to come up with this. It would seem anybody who ever played the game of Risk could have identified those three options in the course of a conversation at a cocktail party.
Well, yeah, but at least one of the options is not go on doing what we're doing. So that in itself here is this is not the analysis by the Baker Hamilton Iraq Study Group, which is outside of government. This is the analysis of inside the government, inside the Pentagon. So I really think when you boil these things down, even the military itself is favoring fundamental change in our strategy. That is progress.
As Dana just pointed out, going big would seem to be impossible unless we're calling the Hessians again, because the military is so extraordinarily stretched thin. Going home would seem to be out because of the possibility of full-blown civil war in Iraq, at least in the short term. Do we deduce by default that going long is the most viable option? And what would, if that is the case, what would that entail?
Well, I mean, going long is the default American position. When you look back at Germany, Japan, Korea, even the Sinai, even Bosnia, where we still have a small number of troops, that's what we do. And we are a force of stability normally. The key to all of those missions has been that the combatants themselves are done fighting, and that we're able there to stabilize situation, and hopefully over time things get better. The key in Iraq, of course, is that we don't have that kind of stability. The insurgency, the violence is actually just starting. It's not concluding.
PJ, is what we really should be concluding looking at these options, despite the improvement that you pointed out, that none of them are just keep things as they are? Really, we have no good U.S. military options in Iraq?
We do not have any good military options, and I think Kissinger's right that from a military standpoint, and John Murtha started here in discussion over a year ago, the military has largely done all that it can do. I think the one mission that's inherent in go long is still transitioning from combat forces to training forces. That makes sense, but at this point in time, you really have to look to the Iraqis. What kind of political process will they, put forward to reconcile the insurgents, to deal with the militia, and find some accommodation among the Shia, Sunnis, and Kurds. If they're not willing to step up and do those things politically, there's really nothing the military can do.
Ultimately, is the headline here what you suggested at the beginning, that no matter what option the U.S. military ends up taking in Iraq, the very commissioning of a study like this might be seen as an admission by the administration or an acceptance of the reality that the current plan there just is not working and has not been working for a long time?
The headline here is that it's the military that's looking for a way out, and as the President said all along, I'm going to listen to my commanders. I suspect that you've just heard the first foray from General Pace. It's time to get as many of these troops out of Iraq as possible.
And the politics that follow that would be what? Would be a sense of I'm listening to my generals finally?
I think from the White House standpoint, that's exactly right. Now, the President is the decider. He's not up for re-election. Whether it's the generals on the one hand or the Baker-Hamilton group on the other, he doesn't have to listen to them. But I think there's going to be a combination of forces here, both on the Hill and from the Pentagon, that says it's time to not stay the course. It's time to change the course.
Would that we had said this a year ago. P.J. Crowley,
Absolutely.
With the Center for American Progress. As always, sir, great thanks for your time.
Pleasure, Keith.
Still ahead of us tonight, my special comment on the lessons of Vietnam that the President cannot or will not learn, and how American service personnel are dying because he will not learn them. Also, the jockeying for position for the '08 presidential